Let's talk about elections having consequences in your specific case. I characterized your race as the marquee general election race of the 2012 cycle. I think everybody would agree that that's true. There are rarely competitive general election Senate races in Texas, but this is going to be one for the books. Redistricting, we know what happened, back, forth. You're basically in the same district that you were in last time. It was a Republican district. It's the only of the 31 Senate districts, it is the only district, as I understand it, where the party identification of the district is out of sync with the party of the state senator representing it, the only one. It's in fact a plus 10 Republican district by the last set of numbers that I've looked at. You beat Senator Breimer, an incumbent last time, with less than 50% of the vote, just below 50%, and were helped by a libertarian in that race, who actually got more than 2% of the vote. The libertarian represented, more than the margin between the two of you. You have no third-party candidate in this race. Last time you had the fortune to run against, I would say, someone whose geographic base was Arlington. Your geographic base was Fort Worth. This time you have somebody who is from Fort Worth. No third-party candidate. And a year in which arguably President Obama is less popular in Texas today than he was in '08. How are you going to make this work for you?
I believe very strongly that the people in Senate District 10 aren't looking at whether I have a D or an R next to my name. They're looking at whether I'm doing the job they want to see me doing. And honestly, Evan, that, I believe, substantially carried me into the seat in the first place, back in '08.
Do you think that's why you won? It was about personality, not party?
I think that people were looking for someone who was going to stand for them. And I had a reputation on the city council in Fort Worth of doing that. I represented a diverse group of neighborhoods, people rich and poor, white, black, Hispanic, and we worked together so incredibly well. The people in Senate District 10 that I've been talking to in the interim, Republican and Democrat alike, have said to me, thank you for standing up for us. Thank you for standing for public education. Thank you for having the courage to push back against the status quo in Austin. They've seen the fights that I've had on predatory lending. They've seen the fights I've had on runaway insurance costs and electricity costs. And they've seen that I've stood and said, I'm willing to be a solution maker, not a person who simply stands and says no to everything. And that's what people want. They don't get nearly as wrapped up as we do here in the Austin climate about whether you have a D or an R next to your name. And I feel very strong support in that community. And I think it's going to be evidenced in this campaign. I truly do. Do
you think there was a Get Wendy effort by the Republicans during redistricting in the same way that some believe there was a Get Lloyd effort during redistricting?
I think that the Republicans, of course, would very much like to have this seat. They view it as their seat.
Well, it is plus 10 Republican, is it?
I don't think it's plus 10. I'm going to have to take exception with you there,
okay,
but we'll have that more detailed conversation another time.
I am but a talking head. I'll let you and Ross. Fight that out.
But remind me of your question.
Well, the question was, do you think that there was a Get Wendy effort? Do you think that they made a deliberate effort at the beginning of the session? We have to look at where we have the opportunity to pick up a seat in the Senate. We may not be able to get to 21. But we think we can get to 20, and the road to 20 runs right through Wendy Davis.
Here's what I think they think about when they look at this district. This is a very diverse district. It's really a microcosm of the state as a whole. It's very balanced in terms of its Republican and Democratic makeup. And what they see is that it's had the opportunity, because of that balance, to elect someone who brings balance, and someone who is a voice on behalf of all of that constituency.
You view yourself as a balanced
Absolutely, I
senator.
do, 100%.
Well, you know that Mark Jones, the Rice University professor, identified you as the second most liberal member of the Senate behind Senator Ellis. He might take issue with this question of balance.
Well, I take issue with his analysis. I mean, his analysis didn't look quantitatively or qualitatively at the things we were voting on. Instead, he simply looked at, relative to the rest of the crowd, were you voting with them all the time, or were you voting on your own sometimes? That's the only thing he was looking at. And when you look at the agenda that came through the legislative session last session, an extremely conservative, extremely special interest, ideological agenda, that is not in step with most Republicans or Democrats across our state. It is not a moderate agenda, and the things that I was voting for put me very squarely in keeping with the moderate philosophy and mindset of the people that I represent in Senate District 10. What I think Republicans don't want to see is someone who has the ability to be a voice for that. Because if I can be a voice for Republicans and Democrats alike in Senate District 10, it may spell trouble in terms of their messaging statewide.
Right.
If there's a person who has the ability to call them out for what they're doing and hold them responsible for what they're doing in a way that's resonating with Republicans too, they don't like that. And I think it very much was in their mind's eye that they wanted to silence the voice that I was bringing to the table.
Well, you understand that Mark Jones's methodology notwithstanding, there are really two arguments that they're making against you already. The general election campaign has, for all practical purposes, begun. And the first is avowed liberal Wendy Davis. So you say, I'm more moderate, Mark Jones is wrong. Will you run from that phrase? I mean, there are a lot of people in Texas, some number, who don't think that liberal is a pejorative. Do you run from being described as a liberal?
I don't run from phrases. I don't think phrases matter to people. I
Well,
think
it'll matter to the Shelton campaign. They intend to hang that phrase around your neck. My question is, how will you react when they do?
The way I will react is to talk about the things that I'm doing in the Capitol on behalf of the people that I represent. And I think that they're smart enough to know that the person who's asking to take this job from me is a person who voted for these budget cuts, who didn't have any solutions brought to the table in terms of alternatives that we could have for public education and health and human services funding. They're going to see a person who voted in favor of the Planned Parenthood amendment and gutting the women's health program. And set aside all of that, another $76 million in cuts that occurred to family planning centers all over the state of Texas, even before that decision was made. I think what they see in me is someone who's fighting for the things that they care about. Again, someone who's courageous enough to stand against some pretty strong lobbies in the state capitol. And let's face it, Evan, there aren't a whole lot of people there that are willing to do that. And if someone feels like they've got a person, and I've had many people say this to me, I don't agree with everything you do, but what I love is that you're willing to stand up and have the courage to stand for something and to not be afraid of pushing back against the status quo and the way it's always been and the I win, you lose mentality. I really believe that resonates.
To that point, and to your assertion that you are a balanced member of the Senate, not just a liberal, but a balanced who represents both sides, can you name a big issue on which you disagreed with or bucked the Democratic Party?
A big issue that I bucked the Democratic Party.
You said that, people know me as someone who stands up to, to various interests. Tell me an issue so that moderates who are looking to find a reason to support you will disbelieve those who say she's simply another liberal senator. One big issue on which you bucked the Democratic Party.
I don't think that they're looking to determine that I've bucked the Democratic Party.
They're not looking, I'm looking.
Right.
So, can you give me one?
I can't think of one right now, Evan.
Okay.
I'm sure there is something out there.
Let me quickly.